guys, so I'm here to do my end of month reading wrap up for the month of November. I did a mid-month wrap up again this month because I feel like I'm reading like at a slightly faster pace. Again, I have 5 books to talk about with you in this video, and I want the space to be able to give you my full thoughts on these books without filming an hour-long video. And if I had talked about 10 books in one video, I either would have talked about them all very briefly, or again it would have been an hour-long video, which I would have got sick of, so I'm sure you would have got sick of. If you didn't see my first wrap-up of the month that I did in the middle of November, then I will link it down below so you can check out those reviews. But without further ado, let's get into my reviews for the 5 books I read in the second half of the month. So the first book I read in the second half of the month, I actually listened to, and it was an audiobook of In the Country We Love by Diane Guerrero. This is a non-fiction book. It's a memoir. It is all about the actress Diane Guerrero's experience and life growing up in America as an American citizen, but the daughter of undocumented immigrants from Colombia. So her parents immigrated to the United States before she was born, so she was born in the United States. They fell pregnant whilst in the United States. However, they never got their legal citizenship, and when Diane Guerrero was 14, they were deported and she was essentially left stranded to sort of fend for herself. And it's about the constant fear growing up as a child in that situation, what her parents went through, the racism involved in the state, the institutionalized racism, how afraid she felt to talk about it and uncomfortable, and then how it affected her in her later life, and like sort of added to mental health struggles she was having as an adult and when she was studying at college. And you might recognise Diane Guerrero from Orange is the New Black or Jane the Virgin. I think those are 2 of the most famous things she's been in, but she's an actress, fantastic actress. And I really enjoyed this book. It was really like intense. It was a very like, obviously she went through some massive struggles, so it's like intense to listen to. Again, I liked listening to it because it was read by Diane, and I think that's really wonderful when a biography or a memoir or an autobiography is read by the author, because you heard all the emotion in her voice and exactly the kind of emphasis she wanted to put on certain aspects, and I felt like I was listening to her story from her, and I think that really works and actually adds an extra layer to books like this. It was also very accessible and very easy reading, you know, like you could just jump straight in and it felt just like a personal account. It just felt like somebody chatting with you, telling you about their story and all the things that they've been through, and it felt very like personal because of that. Easy reading in terms of the way it was written and not necessarily the topic, but a very important and a very relevant book, I think. It only came out a couple of years ago, and I would really incredibly highly recommend that you check it out. Really important book. But I did read one other non-fiction book, and this is one I started a little while ago and it took me a while to read for reasons I will explain, and that is Not All Dead White Men by Donna Gzugerberg. Classics in Misogyny in the Digital Age. So Donna Gzugerberg is a classicist, and this is a book that looks specifically at like the manosphere online and kind of alt-right groups, specifically those, I mean, there's overlap here, but specifically the kind of alt-right's misogyny and its approach to women, you know, like these people on threads and websites and books writing stuff about how women need to have male legal guardians who should choose what they wear, who don't really believe in the concept of rape and all of these kind of things. Like really deeply ingrained misogyny and sexism that's quite frightening, and that's what made this book quite a slow read for me, because she was quoting a lot of these people that write this stuff, this really like quite aggressive, hateful stuff about how women should be subordinate to men, and that I found quite intense. I would maybe read like 10 pages and then need to put it down because I would need to step back, but it was a really good book. So she's specifically looking about this in the context of how these groups use classics, ancient history and ancient literature to defend their positions based on Greek and Roman culture. And I think it's incredibly interesting to me from the perspective of a classicist, and very important to know that people are doing this with an area that I like consider myself a like progressing expert in. I'm doing my PhD in classics, if you're not familiar. So it's good to see how this stuff is being manipulated by modern groups, and it's being manipulated both in the way that there is a lot of sexism in ancient literature and in antiquity, but that doesn't mean it's a good example. But it's also been manipulated in the sense some of it's been taken out of context, so it's like complicated. There's misrepresentations there, and as a classicist, a lot of the things that these alt-right groups say, like, I could like contrast with my own knowledge of antiquity, but they're not really willing to listen. But at the same time, some of what they're picking up is sexism and misogyny and atrocious values in ancient Greek and Roman societies, and it's also important to know that that is there as a classicist. So for this being a book that I think was a little under 200 pages, there is a lot packed into here. It's such a fascinating, if disturbing, topic to read about, and I think this book is accessible to non-classicists for sure. I think like the real important information to help you understand what she's talking about is given. However, because I'm a classicist, there was also points in it where I was like, I don't necessarily agree 100% with what she was saying in terms of the ancient material. However, I thought overall the premise was fantastic and a really like important book, not just in my field but also in looking at kind of like misogyny in the modern day. So it really like combined two things that are actually very close to my heart, because obviously I spend a lot of time in the digital sphere. I'm a woman in modern society and I also study classics, so I thought this was a really, really great and important book, and like I said, I think accessible to people outside of classics because it feels more about modern issues than it does about classics. But it obviously does talk a little bit of classics, so if you're not familiar with classics, that might make it a slightly denser read, but no less worth checking out. So again, really, really fascinating. But I then read 3 fiction books. So the first one, what should I talk about? I will talk about the sequel to Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan, which is China Rich Girlfriend. So I read Crazy Rich Asians this month as well. I talked about it in my wrap up in the first half of the month, and generally really enjoyed it, although like I said in that video I did have some issues with it. And I have to say I didn't enjoy China Rich Girlfriend as much. It was sort of like a 3-star read, so I still overall enjoyed the experience. I think there's a lot of things that are fun and unique and compelling about these books, but not as much in the second one. I found the things that annoyed me about the first book in the series annoyed me more in the second one, and I also felt something that people had said to me when talking about the first one. They felt that Rachel and Nick, who are 2 of the main characters, although not the only main characters, were a little bit lacking in personality, which I didn't feel as much in the first book, but in this book they did not feel like they had a lot of personality. I think what let the second book down was the plot. The plot was not as good per se, or as compelling, so I had more time to focus on those little things that annoyed me about it, whereas in the first one I found the plot a lot more like compelling. If you're not familiar, it's about Rachel Chu, who has been going out with her boyfriend Nick for about 2 years. She is Chinese American, and she isn't aware that Nick is actually from one of the richest families in Asia, and she finds this out at the beginning of the first book, and his family don't necessarily react very kindly to her being introduced to the family because she's not from a wealthy background. But at the same time, we also follow different characters, so we follow Nick's cousin Astrid, and different people in this world. And I did think it's fun, and I did enjoy the second one enough for me to then read the third one, but I would say it's not like the best series I've ever read. I found the second one quite average but fun, and that is sometimes what I want, but I don't think I'm going to read the third one right now. It's probably going to be a few months before I read the third one. I think I'm kind of overwhelmed by all of the gratuitous money spending in the first 2 books for a while before I'll be reading book 3. But I did then read 2 more books. The next one was Dreamer's Pool by Juliets Marilla. Yes, another Juliet Marilla, my 6th Juliet Marilla of this year. I buddy read this one with my friends Lauren and Jill, who have booktube channels. There was a bit of my hair in there. So I'll link their channels down below. And we all really enjoyed this, which I'm so grateful for, because I was the one that was really pushing the Juliet Marilla hard, so I'm glad they weren't disappointed, because that would have been so awkward. This is the first in her Blackthorn and Grimm series, which is another one of her adult fantasy series set in medieval Ireland. So I hadn't read this series before, which also made me a little bit nervous that maybe it could have let us down, but it did not disappoint for me. I still adored this book, and I have already ordered book 2 because I really want to know what happens next. It has similarities with her other books, but it also is quite unique and stands on its own, and compared to the other books I've read by her, this one is multiple perspective with 2 male narrators and a female narrator, whereas all the other books I've read by her have had female narrators, so I feel like that mixed it up a little bit. Our three characters are Blackthorn, Grim and Orin. So Blackthorn and Grim are two prisoners. Blackthorn is a healer woman, a wise woman, and Grim is this man that we don't really know much about, have escaped from prison at the beginning of the book. And Blackthorn has been given this task by a Fey man to go and set up as a wise woman in this small kingdom. So she's off to do that, Grim comes along with her, and the prince of this kingdom is called Orin, and Orin has recently become engaged, but when the woman he's engaged to comes to his kingdom, she doesn't seem like the woman he's been corresponding with, so he's suspicious of her. So those are the three main characters, and there's those mysteries, but there are other mysteries. It was one of those fantastic stories where there was just loads of things to keep you interested in. And like I mentioned, there are elements of magic, there's some like suspicious, strange things going on, there are fae, although most of our main characters are just ordinary humans. And again, I just find this one really compelling. What I find particularly with Juliet Marilla's adult books is they give me real anxiety, but in a good way. Like, I feel so invested in the characters, I'm really worried about their fates, and I could foresee what was going to happen at the end of this book before it happened, but it kept me guessing. I was never 100% sure. And I was guessing along with it in the way that I felt like it was giving me clues, and I was guessing at the right points, not guessing because it was obvious, but because the author was leading me there. So it felt right, if that makes sense, and I just loved this book so much. I also feel like it touched on some sort of like contemporary issues, which was really interesting, even though it was set in medieval Ireland, and like I said, I'm going to be starting on book 2 very soon. But lastly, I read Of Love and Other Demons by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is my first ever Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He is a Latin American author from Colombia, and this is translated from Spanish, I believe, by Edith Grossman. Like I mentioned, first Gabriel Garcia Marquez, but he is pretty famous, particularly in the magic realism genre. Some of his most famous books are Love in the Time of Cholera and 100 Years of Solitude, and I do want to read those. One thing I have come away from this book feeling is that his writing is beautiful. I completely understand why everybody adores Gabriel Garcia Marquez as a writer, because his prose are stunning. It reminded me a lot of my favourite kind of magical realism authors like Jeanette Winterson. It reminded me a little bit of Kurt Vonnegut. Just gorgeous prose. Like, one of the things I felt when I was reading this was like, I completely get why my dad loved this author, because my dad loved Gabriel Garcia Marquez and had all of his books on the bookshelf. And reading it, I just was reminded of the kind of thing my dad likes. Like, I'm very familiar with the kind of books he likes. We read a lot of the same books when he was still alive, and I was reading this thinking, oh, my dad, yeah, I completely get it. My dad must have loved this book. The writing is gorgeous. It's completely the kind of thing he liked. However, I wasn't madly in love with the story. So this one is about a young girl that is bitten by a dog with rabies. So everyone's worried she's going to get rabies, although it doesn't at first seem like she's getting rabies, and then it seems that she is possessed by a demon, or at least some people think she's possessed by a demon, so she gets kind of kept hostage, essentially, in a convent. And a priest comes to exorcise her. And this young girl is about 12 years old, and this priest is in his 30s. And the priest develops like a sexual, romantic desire towards her. And I found that really disturbing. Like, the age gap made me feel so uncomfortable, and it didn't feel like it was explored in the sense of this is a really uncomfortable age gap. I didn't think that that was in any way what the author was going for. I think it was just an element of his weird, surreal story. There was no actual sex between these two characters, but still, that kind of lowered my rating because I did not get why that needed to be there. I didn't feel like it added anything, and I didn't feel like it was being addressed in, like, any kind of analytical manner, like, but in saying that, I still gave this book 3 stars because the writing was stunning, the imagery was gorgeous book to read. So I, like, did not hate this book. That element just made me uncomfortable and meant it's not like a new favourite book, but did mean I wanted to read more by this author. So I am definitely going to be reading more Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Let me know which one you think I should read next. Perhaps aside from the 2 most popular ones that I mentioned, if you have any more recommendations, I'd love to hear them. But yeah, so interesting. I'd be really interested if any of you have read this book and what you thought of it. those are all of the books I read in the second half of the month. However, I hope you enjoyed this video and hearing about the books I read and my reviews. I'd love to talk about these books with you in the comments down below, so please do let me know if you have read or are interested in reading any of these books, and I will see you all again soon. Bye guys!